tell me right now, highest level,
Yes.
like at the top of the pyramid, and then we'll dive deeper.
Yeah.
What do you think is a
yeah.
big social problem?
Yes.
Or at least several social problems.
Yes. Yeah. So for the social thing, I feel like this is kind of like the crux of, I feel like, the problems that this country is facing. Kind of what I was saying at the beginning about how our system is failing to a very extreme extent. Basically, I think we are divided more so as a country now than we probably ever have been. But again, that word division and polarization specifically is a very complex term. And to really dig into understanding what that means, I do feel like there's different avenues we need to take to unpackage this problem. So this issue with polarization, we are an extremely polarized society now, and that polarization can really easily, empirically be noticed in two specific areas. One in ideological sorting and one in affective polarization. And now the latter of which is like the more political sciencey definition, but it actually is very real and empirical. The idea that in affective polarization specifically is the idea that you don't just view the other people who you disagree with as your political opponents who have valid views from you. You think that your political opponents are the enemy. And now that slight difference is actually what makes all the difference.
Oh, that's dangerous, dude.
Yeah,
that's
right.
not a
Real
slight
dangerous.
difference at all.
view the
That's
people
literally
who you-
saying that's the difference between a discussion and an argument.
Right.
Yeah.
But so when you view the other person as not just your political opponent but your enemy, what it actually does is it raises the stakes of politics. And that's like what we're key, like that's the key point that we're talking about here. It raises the stakes. It makes politics from broad argument to a zero-sum game. And that is the key difference that's been going on these last 40 years that makes a big difference. And then the other difference to put on top of that is something called ideological sorting. And that's something, once again, very empirical and quantifiable. The idea that people are now sorting their identities into partisan identities. So now what that means, just very broadly, is, and again, I'm adapting a lot of this from some of the stuff that I've read, most notably a book called Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. I think he does a phenomenal job of, yes, Pete's pointing to the stack of books on my desk. But the idea of ideological sorting is very interesting because it separates us into identities. And going into a little social identity theory, the idea is that every person has identities. So we all have an identity that we're all tennis players, for example. We all have an identity, we are focused on health. I'm a college student, we're living in Boston. We're
Calisthenics
urban.
for the win, baby.
Calisthenics, right. We all have these different identities. And I'm personally not religious. That's my big identity. So we all have these identities. They vary in potency and, strength. So now in American history, in the 1950s and 60s, for example, there were certain people that had identities that, like, there were certain people who were segregationists and racists, like just blatant racists who believed that black people were inferior to white people. And like, that was what they believed. That was their core identity culturally, that was just something that they believed. But in that identity, you could also have that view and be a New Deal Democrat, i.e. being wanting to have socialist policies and stuff like that. So you actually, what that's called in political science is cross-cutting of identities. So that's something that was around in the 1950s and 60s. But the key point that I'm getting to is now what we're seeing is those identities are not cross-cutting anymore, and we're seeing stacking. And this is like the key point, along with the affective polarization becoming like the enemy. The identity stacking is what's key. Because once all of your identities stack and you have all of the people who are culturally conservative to be economically conservative, and you have all the people who are, college educated to be liberal, for example. I'm not necessarily saying that's entirely the case, but generally the trend lines do point to some types of like variants like that. So once you have all of these identities stacked with each other, plus that idea of the other side as the enemy, you get these like super identities that are extremely salient to people. And if you attack one thing, you attack everything. And so that idea, and you're not just attacking the political parties, you're attacking your core identity of what it means to be a Christian, for example. So again, that's everything there. And then you have to add the final layer, which is those identities have been attached to our politics and partisanship. So now all of our identities are aligned perfectly with our partisan identities. And that is what's the most dangerous thing for our political system. Our political system was not designed for that and has never been. It's been designed to have geographical, it's designed to take care of geographical disputes, not partisan disputes. So that's what's breaking our current political system. Those identities and the identity stacking, as well as viewing the other side as the enemy. All of those things coming together are providing something very dangerous for our political system.
And that's just social. Because I actually have, I have a really, I guess, I'm not going to say I'm very well versed, but I have an interesting view on the economic indicators. And, you said zero-sum game before. I found it very interesting because on an economic scale, macro especially, we've been in some way, shape, or form playing a positive sum game almost. And so I actually find that, when you try to have one side being a positive sum game and then another side being a zero-sum game, that's also a huge imbalance that just causes a whole plethora of disaster when you kind of just move farther down the line. And then, like, as you said, social implications are leading to political just complete imbalance as well. But just these two things in general. But I want to go into economics as well with you.
And one last thing too, specifically what I was saying about the social stuff, it makes politics a zero-sum game in the sense that now there's no incentive to work across the aisle. And democracy requires you to have conversations and compromise. And if that idea of working across the aisle with the enemy of, not just the enemy politically, but the enemy of, your religion, the enemy of your lifestyle, the enemy of, it's like there's an amazing book by a political scientist called Toyota and Ford divide or something like that, or Prius pickup. Prius and pickup, Prius versus pickup. And the idea of all of these identities stacking on each other and then playing out in our political institutions, that's what's dangerous. And that's the thing that kind of changed these past 40 years or so.
It's actually kind of interesting when you think about it. This idea that you should, no matter if your neighbor is that grumpy old dude that's saying, get off my goddamn lawn or something, you should still be nice to him, for instance, right? Even if he's just completely on the opposite side of the political spectrum from you. And if you can't have a conversation with a person, which is clearly the state of our social affairs nowadays in the US, maybe in the world. I don't know. I am no global person that knows what's going on in every other country. But I can tell you, being in the US, no matter if I'm going to be in the East Coast or in the South or West Coast, maybe, I don't know, Minnesota or your favorite state, South Dakota, Alex. But, wherever I go, I'm going to be meeting people that have one view, and I don't find people that are willing to listen to something else. They're only willing to listen to something that they believe in and throw their opinion onto me.
But again, dig deeper to why that is.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
The reason why that is because they think that your view, for whatever reason, for whatever cross-cutting identity that you have, your view is fundamentally threatening to you.
But see, here's the crazy part. Right. It's this phenomena that we observe is, once again, inherent to human nature.
Right.
Which is crazy, man.
Right.
We are tribal, man.
Right.
We conglomerate together into groups and parties and hordes because that's how we survive. It's crazy, because as a collective whole, human beings are very smart. On an individual basis, we're smart only to a certain extent. We've had this conversation before, Alex. But the problem is that when you bring groups like this bigger, you start to have this idea of groupthink, and that literally that can just be either super, super positive or super, super negative. It's an extremely powerful idea, no matter what it's supporting. So we just, as a group in general, we have to try to allow people with a slightly different view on stuff be able to let those things kind of surface, be a little more meritocratic about it rather than just having one belief, one ideological system, and then, letting that kind of run wild and talk for the whole group. When the reality is you have one person that might just completely disagree, but because they have like maybe 75% of their things aligning with those, they all of a sudden fall into the group. And then if they don't have the, I guess, clarity to recognize what they're doing, they're just going to start joining that group and shunning the other side because of that. You see, it's like, it's a whole domino effect. It's terrible. It's crazy. Alex looks like he's thinking right now.
You're both right, but unfortunately, here's the question. What are you going to do to stop it?
Yeah.
Well, that's
here's the thing.
That's the $1 million.
And for what Pete's little side story, I once again, I think it's 100% education. I 100% think these people, like you and me, we had a few disagreements now, but I'm willing to listen to you, and I'm hoping you're willing to listen to me, because we're not afraid to
100%.
exchange ideas, because maybe one of us will convert the other, maybe we'll agree to disagree, but we're not afraid to listen to different ideas.
Of course.
These people who are like, oh, you like Trump, oh, that means you hate this. It's like, why do you say that? It's like, oh, because that neo-Nazi supports Trump. It's like, okay, like that's a very radical leap, but unfortunately, because you're looping them all together, it's like, oh, well, you're either one or the other. There is no middle, there is no hybrid, and this is causing a division. But unfortunately, especially in the politics, if you are a Democrat and you believe something that the other Democrats don't believe in, then you're not a Democrat anymore. And that fear of like...
I mean, the same thing can be said about...
both.
Not,
it's like if you're...
It's right. It's just a story of tribal, as Pete was saying, tribal nature of humans.
No, because like the people, and that's in the political side, these guys want power, essentially, most of them. I sincerely doubt these guys are like selfless angelic saints. These guys are doing this because they want some sort of power and a lot of money, but they still are doing some good, I hope. But they have to like play their cards right. How many times do you think a politician has told the truth? When's the last time you heard a politician say, I made a mistake? What, 100 years, 200 years ago? When's the last time someone said, you know what, I had a good intention, but my idea was wrong, and I admit fault, and I'm going to put all my power into fixing it? It's like, no. It's like when you make a mistake, it's like, it's the other guy's fault. He hindered me. He stopped me. The other group, it's their fault. Continue to vote for me. I didn't make a mistake. They made a mistake. Because they believe this. And now it's like, it's all about power. And because people are not very educated, the media is so biased, now they're just picking sides. They're picking the side that they win, that suits them. Which boils down essentially to mob mentality. It's like, I want to be on the winner side. Why would I want to be on the loser side?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of different... I mean, again, like there's so much there. But I mean, the one thing about when have you heard a politician apologize? I mean, I think for sure. I mean, under the Obama administration, I mean, I can just think of one off the top of my head. I remember Obama saying the healthcare rollout, ironically enough, was disastrous, and he said, it was terrible. It affected millions of people's lives, and like that's something that's terrible. But again, like that's kind of just saying, well, it's not Democrats' problem, it's Republicans. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying like it happens. The idea that it doesn't happen is true to a certain extent, but it always just has to be kind of moderated a little bit.
When did he say that?
Right after, in 2014, after the rollout of healthcare.gov, that terrible rollout of the website. that was just absolutely horrible.
Oh, the website he was apologizing for?
Yeah, the website. So, I mean, but I again, like I'm just saying that to just offer a counterexample that, it's not like all politicians lie all the time, because then I feel like that specifically lets Trump off the hook to a certain extent. I mean, and I'm not saying this to be like, Trump is bad at 100%. Like I personally think Trump is horrendous and it's, just bad, but that's not why I'm saying that. I'm saying that because it's just objectively true. He lies all the time and more than any other president. Like just objectively.
Did any Democrat during the Obama administration criticize Obamacare ever?
Yes.
Harshly, though?
On many occasions.
Is that so?
Mainly, what?
Is that so?
Absolutely, especially people on the left. I mean, Obamacare was originally designed to be this, left-wing, single-payer transition platform, but it turned into pretty centrist, not particularly left-wing policy. And so, I mean, there was a lot of criticism on the left from Obamacare specifically. I mean, and we can go through the list. I mean, that's just one example, but definitely, yes.
Okay.
Interesting.